No. 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 Yes. Yes. They don't have a house, so they have to go on a boathouse. The people who run away from evil. You come from a different country to escape something. To be safe. Your house could be bombed. My mum showed me a picture how my old house was damaged. It's scary because people are being killed, and that's not nice. They're not doing anything wrong. They're just trying to go to another country because there's wars.
So who am I speaking to?
So my name's Ruth Halbert,
Ruth.
and I'm from Denmark on the south coast of Western Australia.
Okay, so today we're at the Walk Together rally, and then at the moment we're at the festival locations.
That's right.
But I have some question because I've been kind of follow and not follow the whole asylum and refugee issue and topic. Okay, so there's 3 islands have this refugee there, and I hear a lot about this inhumane treatment.
Yeah.
Can you tell me more about this?
Well, the inhumanity is due to many things. The worst is the fact that it's very arbitrary. Some of the people who arrived by boat were sent to Australia, and some people who were on the same boats ended up on Manus and Nauru.
Okay.
So the people who are on Manus and Nauru feel all the time, why were they the ones who were sent to offshore detention? Why weren't they sent to Australia? The other part that's incredibly inhuman, of course, is they don't know when they're going to be free.
Yeah.
So they have committed no crime. It is not illegal to seek asylum.
Yep.
It is not illegal to arrive by boat.
The Australian government has a strict policy on refugees, holding them in what it calls processing centres. They look more like prison camps for a bureaucratic waiting game that can last for years. And those camps aren't even in Australia. One is on Manus Island in Papua New Guinea, the other in the Pacific island nation of Nauru. The offshore camps have been called Guantanamo Bay Down Under. The difference being they're not holding enemy combatants or prisoners of war, just refugees trying to get to Australia by boat. The government in Canberra says its detention system is designed to deter refugees who pay big money to smugglers to get them to Australia. Hundreds have already died at sea making those journeys. The camps are completely off limits to journalists, but news does trickle out. Some of the stories are chilling: torture, sexual abuse, suicides. And the penalties for the whistleblowers feeding those stories to the news media are stiff. However, journalists are still trying to tell the story, and people on the inside are still blowing the whistle.
It's one of the most contentious issues in Australian politics. It's Australian policy to house asylum seekers who enter the country illegally by boat in offshore detention centres. Even if they are found to be refugees, the government does not allow them to settle in Australia. Human rights groups say the policy is barbaric. But according to polls, most Australians support at least part of the policy. Australia's tough stance on migration is not new. John Howard's Conservative government introduced the so-called Pacific Solution in 2001. The aim was to stop asylum seekers crossing by boat from Indonesia. The government then opened 3 offshore camps, one in Nauru, one on Christmas Island, and another in Manus Island, Papua New Guinea. At the time, this policy was popular with voters. When Labor leader Kevin Rudd won the federal election in 2007, he largely dismantled the program, but his successor Julia Gillard quickly backtracked.
Why would you get on a boat, pay your money, risk your life, if the outcome was you ended up back in the regional processing centre?
And when Labor lost power to the Conservatives in 2013, Tony Abbott only hardened the policy.
If you travel by boat without a visa, you will not make Australia home.
An uncompromising message, delivered in multiple languages.
ऑस्ट्रेलिया दे आशर को तब भाबছেন कोई भी इंसानी स्मगलिंग करने वाली किश्ती वापस लौटा दिया जाएगा।
The Australian government says the policy is working and deaths at sea remain low. Still, it's dogged by controversy and court cases.
This is a policy in freefall.
An asylum seeker has been murdered in custody, while 2 others have set themselves on fire within days of each other.
What we're wrestling with as a nation is not a legal question, it's a moral question.
Protests have broken out across the country against mandatory detention, specifically that of children.
We are asylum seekers. We just run away from lots of bad things. How long I'm going to stay here? 5 years? 6 years? No one knows. I feel that I'm living like animals. I feel I'm a prisoner. I wish I could be a dog. Then I was free. We are looking for freedom, honesty, justice, and safety. That is all we are looking for.
Gabby Sutherland, Tracy Donoghue and Jude Reen all spent nearly a year and a half teaching in the school run by Save the Children in the Nauru Detention Centre. Under Australian law, they could go to jail for talking about the children they taught there, but they've decided they have to.
Well, it's death by slow torture. It's just how to... the place is set up to make people go mad or make people die inside.
You know what? Because the harm is permanent. The damage is done for these children. It is done. 3 years of their lives have been spent in the camp. I just want to make sure it doesn't happen to another generation.
Outside the school, the children weren't called by their names, but were called by their boat numbers.
Wait a second.
They were being treated as criminals. They were going through being detected, metal detected, wandered, on and off the bus at both ends of the school trip. After they'd been there for between 8 and 12 months, that's when you started to see kids, hiding their arms. They were beginning to self-harm.
And I've known students who would, at times sort of say, over that time that I was there, 16 months, would say, I would never do that. No matter how bad this gets, I will never self-harm. And just about every student that has said that to me has self-harmed during their time there.
Then in September 2014, the Australian government put out a video message.
My name is Scott Morrison and I'm the Australian Minister for Immigration and Border Protection. You may have heard that temporary protection visas are to be reintroduced. This policy does not apply to those who are on Nauru or on Manus Island or have been transferred there.
For those in Nauru, it meant any hopes of making it to Australia were crushed.
Processing and resettlement in Australia will never be an option for those who have been transferred to regional processing centres because they have arrived in Australia illegally by boat.
Court in Papua New Guinea judged that it was illegal to have the detention centre on Manus Island, and they set a date of the 31st of October, which is 10 days' time, that the detention centre would be closed. And Australia has not been able to find third countries. Well, a number of countries have offered, but Australia has refused to let the refugees go there. So New Zealand has offered. Some of the refugees, individuals themselves who are on Manus and Nauru, have had relatives who are in other countries organised for them to be able to go, and Australia has blocked them from going. The reason that I have on my poster Free Manus and Free Nauru is because it's not only the people who are in detention, the refugees and the asylum seekers who need to be freed, it's also the people of Manus, the citizens of Papua New Guinea and the citizens of Nauru who are also suffering by what Australia has forced them to do, to take on, well, they didn't take them on, they were forced.
In your opinion, what do you think Australia should do?
Australia should bring all the detainees who are on Manus and Nauru here immediately, allow them to say where they want to go and assist them to go. So for instance, the 52 odd people who recently went from Manus and Nauru to the US, they have to repay their airfares within a set period of time. They weren't even, yes.
Excuse me. So I want to say, oh, let's put Thai ass in the Thai ass. Don't you see?
I know, and I think one reason why a lot of everyday Australians who aren't really informed about this subject, it's so unbelievable. Like, it's so unbelievable.
Totally.
And I've only come to know about it because I've been writing, I have a protest where I write a letter of protest to the Prime Minister every day.
Okay.
I've been doing it since the end of July last year, so I've written him nearly 450 letters.
Wow, amazing.
I post them on my blog. He has not responded to one single letter.
What is your blog?
My blog is ruthhalbert.com.au, and that's my website, and if you go there, the front page is, has my letters on. I have seen Malcolm Turnbull in person. I saw him in Albany in Western Australia when he visited there.
But hold on.
Yeah.
Turnbull. Have you read the transcript between him and Trump?
I know.
Show you some of the highlights. Trump asking about that refugee deal. Why is this so important? I do not understand. This is going to kill me. I'm the world's greatest person that does not want to let people into the country, and now I'm agreeing to take 2,000 people. Well, Malcolm Turnbull continued to push back, saying a deal is a deal. And in explaining Australia's approach, he said, we said if you try to come to Australia by boat, even if we think you are the best person in the world, even if you are a Nobel Prize winning genius, we'll not let you in. That is a good idea, Trump says. We should do that too. You are worse than I am.
I know. We're not. I know. So I guess I direct my letters to the Prime Minister, to the office of the Prime Minister. So whether it's Malcolm Turnbull or hopefully somebody else soon, but even more hopefully the situation will be resolved really soon.
After years of slapping down the government's turn back the boats asylum seeker policy, opposition leader Bill Shorten has taken an epic backflip on the issue, and his colleagues aren't happy.
In my view, it is a cruel and harsh policy.
I'm not in a position to support that policy.
I think the real shift happened in 2001 in the wake of Tampa, and then followed by 9/11, really started to link up this idea that asylum seekers could themselves be security threats, and so this securitisation discourse began.
Asylum seeker policy is probably the one issue that has consistently polarised public opinion, divided politicians and left governments around the world struggling to find solutions to deal with the plight of refugees.
The Fraser government took an extremely humanitarian approach, but since that time, immigration and asylum particularly has become an exceptionally politically divisive issue.
So in this case, who should we look for help? If both of our leaders in the government are not, they're not moving.
I think it's time for just ordinary people like me, and I don't know, I mean,
Lily,
if you're ordinary or not, but for people like people who are here today to just do one small thing, do another small thing, become informed. If you don't want to be involved in what's going on in offshore detention, there is a huge amount of work that needs to be done in Australia for refugees and asylum seekers who are really, really struggling because of the rules that Australia has put into place to make it really difficult. In the news yesterday, it's been announced that Peter Dutton wants to limit refugees and asylum seekers who are on mainland Australia from owning pets. They have to ask permission from the Department of Immigration
Isn't that crazy?
And Border Protection to own a pet.
Pet is such a nice, beautiful thing.
It is this appalling Australian habit of always reminding people that they are not really Australian and that they can't ever relax here because the rules are always going to arbitrarily change. And the idea that Australia is a safe and warm and welcoming place is not borne out by many people's experience here.
So, anything else? Where else people can find information? Other than your blog?
You can go to well-known organisations like the Red Cross and Amnesty International have really good information about supporting asylum seekers both here and internationally. In Melbourne, there's the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre, which is very well known. If you want to be more actively involved, there are a number of protest organisations like Whistleblowers and I can't think what the C stands for, WACA, and there's also the Refugee Alliance Network, which are in all major capital cities. There are lots of groups everywhere doing stuff at all levels, and it's really important that more and more people become involved and raise their voice.
Thank you very much, Ruth.
Thank you so much.
No problems, you know. My head is a bit tired, but I'm gonna cut this shorter. But no. I think, yeah, we all have to do something because this is just wrong. Especially not only in the human condition. When I know about how much money we spend to keep them out of Australia, those money can actually keep in Australia.
We're nearly at $10 billion has been spent.
Nonsense, right?
Completely.
Yeah, and then we are also talking about all this abuse at the moment and the consequences and how much we have to pay later.
Exactly.
We're talking about money, right? Money. This is just wrong.
For 4 years, nearly 2,000 men have been held on Manus Island, which is part of Papua New Guinea. Australia's government exiled them, refusing to hear their refugee claims after they landed in Australia. For that, the men are being compensated an average of almost $30,000 each, more than $50 million in total. Lawyers launched a class action against Australia's government, saying it had failed in its duty of care towards the refugees and wrongly imprisoned them. In a statement, Australia's Immigration Minister said settling the case was not an admission of liability and that he strongly refutes and denies the claims made in the proceedings. But campaigners say the $50 million settlement speaks for itself, that this isn't justice, but it is a start.
This is a video from Aziz Muhammad on Manus Island, Papua New Guinea.
My name is Aziz and I have been detained on Manus Island for 4.5 years by the Australian government. I have seen 6 of friends die because of violence and medical negligence. We have been attacked by Navy and police and we have witnessed abuse by the Australian government paid guard. We are refugees. All we want is a freedom in a safe country, not necessarily Australia. For example, somewhere like Canada, New Zealand or United States. My question to the panel, how long will Australia keep us here in danger?
Is Australia using the lives of others, people who've not committed a crime, as a deterrent?
Well, what I find strange in this debate is that people would seek to give advantage to those that have money, that can afford to pay people smugglers to assist their cause, bypass safe haven after safe haven, and we then say they ought to be given priority as opposed to some that I have personally visited in Western Thailand who haven't been there just for 4.5 or 7 years, but for 20 years waiting for resettlement, who don't have the money or they are determined not to engage criminals to advance their cause.
But Eric, as a matter of principle, you wouldn't have used that argument in the 1930s to Jewish people fleeing Nazism who used and paid people smugglers.
But they went to their first port of safe haven. They were not forum shopping. And with refugees, and I have spoken to many of them, both overseas and in Australia, and they say the first port of call where they are given safe haven is what they want, is what they need. And the one argument I still cannot overcome is, why would you give priority to people that have never set foot in a refugee camp and have the money and the wherewithal to pay a criminal people smuggler to advance their cause over people that don't?
In my line of work, you find that it's the serious criminals with money. They come in, they buy false passports, false certificates. They come in business class. They don't come in via, a people smuggler on a rickety boat. And the second thing is that why won't we take up New Zealand on their offer to take 150 refugees? Why would that be so terrible for us to do that?
Well, because as I understand the circumstances, once you become a New Zealand citizen, entry into Australia then becomes very easy. But our gentleman who was on the program indicated that he was more than willing to be resettled in the United States.
Of course the government is trying to look after people like this, and for you to suggest that the government's going out of its way to make life more difficult for people who are in detention, I think really is obviously unfair. You know, it's not. It's just so clear.
There's so much evidence to the contrary.
This
program is designed to break these people and to send them back. And there's so much evidence.
Just a ludicrous
There's a lot of evidence to this.
That is ludicrous.
Can we just hear? If I could just.
Why isn't the media allowed to report on this properly? Why are we not allowed access?
Excuse me, how did Aziz get onto this program? Please, Kate.
Well, I think, and we really...
Gillian, can you just finish your point, Gillian? You were halfway through a sentence.
We're not allowed to go there.
In those 4 years, not a single journalist has made it in.
There are extraordinary barriers to getting information out about Australia's immigration detention system. I've never been able to get to the Manus Island Detention Centre or the Nauru one, and to be honest, I probably never will. If I even set foot on Nauru, they'd probably arrest me on sight. It has essentially been a media blackout.
Unfortunately, it was not possible for me to get to either centre. It would have been fantastic to get in there to really interrogate some of the claims that are made, to work out the truth. But the reality is that nobody can get to the Nauru Centre. Indeed, these days it would be difficult even to get a visa to get to Nauru at all. In terms of Manus Island, people can get to Papua New Guinea, but the detention centre is absolutely off limits. And the few journalists who have tried to get out there before have been chased away at gunpoint, some have said.
For journalists, getting any access at all to the camps has been impossible.
This is the naval base at Manus.
In 2013, Mark Davis, a reporter for SBS TV, documented his attempts to get into the Manus Island camp.
There's cops. They've seen us come up here, right?
Which turned into a blame game ping-pong match between the bureaucracies of Papua New Guinea and Australia.
I had ministers' staff directly telling me that it wasn't Australia. Australia's an open democracy. It was these troublesome countries of Nauru and Papua New Guinea. Now, I had good contacts in Papua New Guinea, and I soon established that simply was not true. I had the Prime Minister's authority to go there and his good wishes for me to get inside.
I can assure you that you are free to go to Manus anytime you want to.
Ultimately, I had the man who is the head of the processing centre, Papua New Guinea National. He finally consented to me coming into the camp, and here was the ultimate display of Australian power. The Australian guards, on orders from Australian immigration, would not open the gates.
So the Australians are saying they don't want it to happen?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, there is the baldest example of who's keeping people out of those camps, and I saw it firsthand.
The guards always take them down. The authorities may have managed to keep journalists from getting in, but they cannot prevent information from getting out.